Hey dudes, it's Lerald. Harvest is a fantastic currency strategy, one of my absolute favorites, and I think I've said all of this before. So we did a crop rotation video earlier this week. You should check it out if you haven't already, or if you aren't intimately familiar with the mechanics of crop rotation, because this is the advanced follow-up to crop rotation in which we are using Awakening Scarabs, spending multiple divines per map, and potentially making double-digit divine profits in a single map. So let's just go ahead and get right into it, but first be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and join our Discord. There is a link in the description. Okay, so first things first, I made over 200 divines in the last couple of days doing this strategy, so yes, it is profitable. It is very profitable. The most life force I've ever pulled in a single harvest was like 45,000 or so, and at the time that was worth slightly over 9.5 divines. I also found some valuable drops in the rest of the map, you know, Valdos, puzzle boxes, raw divines, that kind of thing. So like over 10 divines in a single map, pretty good. So that's the sales pitch, right? Huge jackpots, massive amounts of currency in individual maps, and above all, I cannot stress this enough, despite the inevitable YouTube comments from people who will say that they did this for 2 maps and lost currency, this is a profitable strategy over time. With that being said, it comes with some serious downsides that I'm going to go ahead and give as the big disclaimer here right off the bat. First off, the maps are hard. We're doing 3 risk scarabs on 8 mod tier 16.5 maps. The harvests spawn 60% more monsters, which means the first few harvests in each map aren't spawning the usual 18 plants worth of tier 1 monsters. They're spawning about 30 plants worth of tier 1 monsters, which is rough. It's not as bad as Dualbox Blight or Chustalva mapping, but it is really hard, so you need a really strong build. The second issue is that this is an expensive farm strategy. The Awakening Scarab required to make this strategy is pretty rare, so right now it costs about 1.5 divines. I've seen it fluctuate all the way down to 1.2. I've seen it jump all the way up to 1.8. The price will fluctuate. The price of life force fluctuates. It's a living, breathing economy. The prices are going to fluctuate, right? The point is, it is not cheap to get started. Unlike regular crop rotation, which is cheap and really great, this is not cheap. You need a good bank of currency to buy a supply of scarabs before you start, and you need enough currency to make sure that if you run into an 18-carat run of bad luck, you're able to handle that. And the third issue is that it is RNG. You will have maps where you lose money, although I actually find those to be pretty rare. 8 mod tier 16.5 maps with 3 risk scarabs, if you just skip the harvest, are naturally going to be pretty rewarding. I get a lot of raw currency in the maps. High value scarabs and tier 17 map drops are also pretty good, and I see a fair amount of those. Kind of not surprising, the average map in this setup has 300% quantity and 100% pack size at minimum, and hopefully some kind of more currency or more scarab roll on top of that. So because of all of that, I usually break even or come out slightly ahead, even on bad maps. It's really the truly awful maps where I actually lose money, and those are surprisingly rare. I would say they are more rare than the pretty good maps. After having done this for about 2 or 3 days now, I've definitely had more amazing maps where I made over 5 divines than I've had horrible maps where I lost a full divine worth of currency. So, with that being said, don't run 2 maps and get mad if you don't instantly profit. That's kind of the point. This is a high investment strategy, and that doesn't just mean currency, it also means time. You either commit to this and do it for a while and you will make serious money, or you shouldn't bother at all. The big jackpots will happen. But I do find that they happen fairly often. I've had a lot of maps in which I made upwards of 25,000 life force, a lot of them. I think my peak is around 45,000 if I remember correctly, which is just a mind-boggling amount of life force in a single map. Now, if you're not ready in terms of raw currency or build strength to do this particular strategy, don't try and force it. Run the strategy we detailed in our previous crop rotation video for a while. It's good, it will make you bank without the huge investment required in this setup, and then you can work your way up to this. Alright, so let's start with the tree, which has changed from the prior setup. We are not forcing harvest into our map by taking all of the nodes in the tree to do that, because we are guaranteeing it with the Awakened Scarab, which guarantees that harvest is going to be in the map, so we don't need to spend any of those points. I also don't want to waste any points on anything to do with shrines in this setup. I want to specifically min-max all of the drops that we're going to get, so I am taking all the Scarab nodes that I can, with one exception here. I'm dropping these 2 points in Scarabs for a very specific reason that I'll get to in a second. taking all of the Eater of Worlds pack size stuff and taking every bit of map mod effect and quant and rarity and all that in the tree that I possibly can. And of course, I'm still taking all of the notables because they're all still mandatory, you know, for maximizing the value of Harvest. So I am taking all the blocker nodes I can. You know, a lot of these Scarabs, Breach, Abyss, Expedition, Legion, all of that are all pretty low value. Ritual isn't really that low value on average, the Scarabs. But ritual monsters are very annoying, and you want to do everything you can to minimize the chances of dying in these maps because they are rippy. So not having rituals in your maps is good for just not having to deal with getting killed by ritual monsters. So what I'm doing with these 2 points over here, these 2 Scarab drop chance points from there, is I'm putting him into a little bit of the points over here. I am actually like trying to balance it out so that I get a roughly even number of purple, yellow, and blue crops in my maps. You can even take like one of these points from, I mean, pretty much just anywhere else. Like you could just take this point right here and just take every single one of the reduced chance nodes. But the risk of running a map and having no yellow plots at all is like, it's bad. I mean, I've had some situations where that happened and actually still made profit just because I was able to juice up the blue plots enough to still get like, you know, 10,000 blue life force, still, you know, do better than break even. But obviously you'd rather have yellow plants in there. So I like this setup, you know, 3 purple, 3 blue, 2 yellow, you know, very slightly higher chance of yellow plots than the others, and some of that will also come into play when I talk a bit more about the strategy, but like you kind of want to end on, instead of the normal crop rotation strategy where you're trying to end on one big plant, you kind of want to end on like a large number of big juiced up plants. So having slightly more yellows, doing all the purples and blues beforehand, and then building up like 3 or 4 really strong yellows instead of like 1 super juiced yellow actually winds up being more profitable. So that's the tree, you know, not really much else left to say about it. You do get a lot more good Scarabs out of this setup by not having like crappy mechanic Scarabs drop. I've definitely noticed that. All right, now let's move on to Scarabs, and I've laid out 3 Scarabs here that these are all pretty much mandatory. I feel like there's maybe some wiggle room, but not really. So the first thing is running 3 Risk Scarabs. These are fairly expensive, they're about 20 chaos each, but they add 2 modifiers, that adds a bunch of quant and rarity and pack size, and it's very valuable. I mean, there's a reason that pretty much all of the high-level farm strategies involve a bunch of Risk Scarabs. I actually don't like them. I would love for them to be nerfed in the coming league. I imagine they will be. I think random modifiers is like kind of lame, but you know, you can't deny that they're good. So then, of course, you're running Harvest Scarab of doubling. You know, this is double life force. Obviously, you're going to run this, kind of mandatory. You know, not really an option to not run that. Then the other thing would be the Horn Scarab of Awakening. That's really what's changing things up. And when you put in one of these Horn Scarabs of Awakening, it adds all of these imbued league mechanic options. And so we take Imbued Harvest, and this has a 50% chance for the Unchosen Crop to not wilt from all the harvests, and a 50% chance for the harvests to spawn an additional monster. This stacks with the Heart of the Grove bonus from the tree for harvest to have a 10% chance for the Unchosen Crop to not wilt, and with the Bountiful Harvest, 10% chance for your harvest to spawn an additional monster. So you get 60% chance to not wilt and 60% chance for an extra monster with a standard tree, which is great, right? But that is also why the first couple of harvests in each map are going to be so incredibly nasty, because you're not getting 18 plants worth of tier 1 monsters, you're getting closer to 30 plants worth of tier 1 monsters thanks to this Scarab. So because we're running Risk Scarabs, we are getting a lot of map mods. We're going to get, you know, starting with an 8 mod map, we're then going to add 6 more, so that's 14 map mods. One thing that's important to note about this is I've been playing Toxic Rain for a lot of this, because Toxic Rain is basically able to do all map mods. It's kind of why I fell in love with it in the first place, like 5 years ago or whatever. There are really only 2 map mods you can't do as Toxic Rain, and that would be the bottom map mods on each of these 2 maps, 50% reduced flask charges and 60% less recovery rate of life and energy shield. And the reason you can't do them is because when they get scaled up by map mod effect from the passive tree, you know, all the top hat and all of that, they just make it so you either can't regenerate life or you get no flask charges. However, when these map mods are added by a Risk Scarab, they don't get scaled up by map mod effect. That's true for all Risk Scarab mods, and so they're actually still doable. They're hard, but they are doable, then so, that's why I've been playing Toxic Rain for most of this. I have played Mamba for some of this, and as long as you don't get the block or poison avoid mods, it's still great. I've even had a couple of spots where I was doing Toxic Rain, and I just had like a really tanky monster, I had the Maven healing it or something, and I had to like tag in the Mamba Pathfinder to come in and kill it, because Toxic Rain couldn't. Now, there is one Scarab setup that I'm not using that I have seen people recommend, and that is just simply throwing in a Horned Scarab of Preservation. These are a little bit cheaper than an Awakening Scarab. Awakening Scarabs are actually kind of high right now. They're close to 2 Divines. This would still be profitable at 2 Divines. I think what's happening right now is that the price of a Divine is actually like falling relative to everything else, because like Life Force has also gone up. You could sell 3,700 Life Force for a Divine. When I was doing this last week, it was closer to like 4,700 when I first started, 4,500 maybe. It had dropped all the way down to 4K by the time I made a video about it on Monday, and now it's down even to 3,700. So I think the value of a Divine is just going down, which is why everything else is going up. So ultimately, I think this is still profitable, even if the Awakening Scarab went up to like 2.5 Divines, and it's nowhere close to that. But, definitely keep everything else in mind when you're doing the calculus on whether this is good. With all of that being said, I don't necessarily think it is totally worth it to run a Preservation Scarab, because that means giving up a Risk Scarab. Risk Scarabs are only worth like 20 chaos each, so it's something you can do. I'm not doing it, but maybe it's worth it depending on everything else. If Risk Scarab value suddenly skyrockets, then it would be, but like these, the doubling Scarabs are super cheap. The Risk Scarabs aren't so expensive, at least for now, that it's worth it, but maybe. All right, now let's talk a little bit about maps. So you want a Corrupted 8 mod T16.5 map. This is one such example. This is actually a pretty bad map. I don't think there's a single tier 17 map mod on this, so this is a really, really bad one. This one, on the other hand, has, I guess, just 2 tier 17 map mods on it, so again, not amazing. This one, on the other hand, has a couple of them, I guess just 2, but it's decently well rolled. And then this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tier 17 map mods on it, and you can see in the quantity and the rarity and the pack size, 165 quant, 59% pack size. This is an awesome map. Like, this is a map that is gonna really, really put out a lot of life force, assuming that the Sacred Grove within the map is good. So there's really 3 ways to get 8 mod tier 16.5 maps. The easiest way is to self-farm them. You do a farm strategy with Cartography Scarabs of Escalation and Corruption. You farm a bunch of maps, whatever strategy you want to do. All the 16.5s that'll drop with this strategy will drop Corrupted with 8 mods. There you go. We've put out videos about how to do this earlier in the league. This was before the tier 16.5 Corrupted 8 mod nerf occurred. I may revise the farm strategy on that, so I guess check back on that soon. I don't know. The other approach is just to buy them from other people who are farming them. Kind of boring. I would never do that. And then the third option is to roll and corrupt regular tier 16.5s up to 8 mods. I've done this some. I've had some success with it. I've had some bad luck with it. This is actually a pretty good hit here. This is one that I rolled. Got good mods on it. Chiseled it up to 20% quality, slapped a couple of Delirium Orbs on it, and then corrupted it. Unfortunately, got 60% less recovery rate of life and energy shield, and I'm running 2 different Pathfinder builds at the moment, so I'm going to have to literally make a new character in order to run this map, but it does look gorgeous, doesn't it? 189 quantity, 49 pack size, 196 more currency, 20 quality, and 2 Delirium Orbs. Now I'm regretting not having put 4 Delirium Orbs on it, since I'm gonna have to make a new character for it anyway. But there you go. That's the approach. I think that is ultimately the best way, but the chance of just you hit it with a Vol Orb and now it goes down to 4 mods and it's a map that sucks is annoying. I've definitely bricked more good tier 16.5s down to 4 mod maps than I have gotten great 8 mod tier 16.5s. But the ability to chisel them and put a couple Delirium Orbs onto them before corrupting is huge. It really adds a ton of quantity, and the Delirious modifiers do apply to harvest monsters, and that means more quantity and rarity on those harvest monsters, which is great. It means more life force, means more chance for them to drop good stuff in addition to life force. As for the rest of your decision making on your maps, I like an easy boss rushable map like Dunes. I obviously have some Defiled Cathedral in here as well, but Dunes is my favorite. I scry a good diff card onto Dunes. Same thing as usual, right? Boss rush, try and get all the player modifiers or player alters that you can, quantity up as much as possible. That's going to get you the most life force that you possibly can. And that's kind of it. All right, now let's talk a little bit about how the approach to this strategy is different from normal crop rotation. So the 60% chance to not wilt means that plants are more likely to not get wilted when you hit a plant in a patch than they are to waste away, right? So because of this, you basically want to start on purple and clear out all of the purple plants around the Sacred Grove, and then evaluate the remaining yellow and blue plants and balance the rest of your strategy accordingly. So the thing about getting way more upgrade opportunities than usual is that there are diminishing returns on upgrading a single crop over and over. The 60% chance to not wilt is really amazing. I've had 3 crop harvests that still wound up turning a profit just because I don't know, every single plant in the harvest didn't wilt, and now I'm suddenly making like 12,000 life force in a Sacred Grove that I was certain was going to be a bust. In terms of really maximizing your profits, I have found that it is better to finish on a bunch of plants of the same color with a lot of tier 3 crops than it is to specifically try and build up one plot with tier 4 crops. Because of that, I am willing to make smart gambles with crop wilting. So I wouldn't gamble a yellow patch with like 5 tier 3 plants on it if the plant that's right next to it is like a purple patch with all tier 1 monsters. But if I have the choice between yellow and blue crops that both have tier 3 plants, I'm going to hit the blue crop and hope that the yellow doesn't wilt, because statistically, my odds are better that it won't. It's a 40% chance for it to wilt and a 60% chance for it to stay and get upgraded by the blues that I'm doing. Sometimes it doesn't pay off, but statistically, the odds are actually in your favor. And that is basically the approach that you want to take here. You want to try and maximize a wide range of yellow or blue plants, and then not worry as much about trying to specifically build up one single plant. So that's Awakened Harvest. It is insanely profitable. It's also dangerous and expensive in RNG and all the bad stuff I previously mentioned, but so what? Live a little, take a chance, make 10 divines in a single map. Why not? Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and join the Skipping Sleep Studio Discord so you can say hello to me in Sunset if you haven't already. And finally, thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us so we can keep making more PoE content, become a channel member as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.